Let's continue with our notification helper class. So inside a business logic, we add a new file. It's a Swift file. We call it Pomodoro notification. Okay. When we're trying to send notification to the user, we have to request for permission first. So our class is going to have a method that does exactly that. If we have not yet asked for permission, we do so. If we have been denied permission, we will send back a boolean that tells us that we do not have permission, and we will ask the user to give us permission. So to send user notifications, we import user notifications package, and the class will be called Pomodoro notification. And the two methods we have, we will make these static because we don't really need an instance of Pomodoro notification. And I personally like static methods because they make reading code a lot easier. So the first method is called check authorization. The second method will be called schedule notification. Okay, to find out if you're authorized to send notifications, we're going to ask the notification center what its settings are, and in there we will find out whether we have the right to publish notifications or not. So let's get the notification center. Do it like that. And this has a get notification settings handler method. This expects a handler method, and we provide that as a trailing closure. And since we're calling an asynchronous method, the get notification settings method in here, we will have to do the same thing for our own method. So let's add that in here. Let's call it completion. And this is a boolean, a method that takes a boolean and returns void. And since this method in here is an escaping method, we have to do the same here as well. Escaping means nothing more or less that the owner of the method, the one that is calling this method, will take care of memory management of the handler method. Okay, let's continue here. So the settings we get from the notification center has a property which is called authorization status. And this is an enum, so we can switch on that. So let's switch on the settings notification status. And there are three status in here stating that we are interested in. One is telling us that we are authorized. So let's just add that. And in that case, we call our completion handler and say, yes, we authorize this issue. And just to make it stop complaining about the switch not being exhaustive, we add the default and set it to false. Another case is denied. So at an earlier point, the user denied us permission to send notifications. Then we get denied. And here we also send completion false, so we can just let it deal with it in the default handler. The other that we're interested in is not determined. So the first time you try to send a notification, the system does not yet know whether you're allowed to do so, and it will ask the user, or we will have to ask the user, if we have permission to send notifications. So that's what we have to do here if it is not yet determined. And we do that by using the notification center's request authorization method. And we use this overload here that takes options, and this just lets us define what we ask permission for, and we want to send an alert, Maybe at a later point we want to send the batch, and of course we want to say play sounds. This also expects a handler method which receives a boolean allowed and a possible error. So we provide that as a closure, so trailing closure. And in here, what we do is we simply request. You simply handle it by looking at the allowed. So if the user said yes, we can just return this, and we use our completion handler to do exactly that. So this might return false or true. This definitely returns true, and all other cases return false. That is all we have to do here. Let's continue with scheduling notifications. And once again, we do that using the notification center. And what we want to do first is we want to get rid of all notifications that we scheduled, because we are scheduling a notification each time the user presses the play button or the resume button. So there might be cases that we have already scheduled a notification and we don't want to send two. Also, we want to get rid of all notifications that have already been displayed but not clicked away by the user. So we do that by removing all notifications that are currently requested. The method start with remove. So these are all the delivered notifications. We no longer want those to be displayed. And we remove also all pending notification requests. So that way we have a clean slate and can continue. What we need to do next is we have to set up the content of the notification. So the content has basically three parts. The notification has a title, it has a message, and a sound. And the content is of type mutable notification content. Let's do it like that. And we set the title. Let's just add a placeholder here. We will change that later. It has a body, the message, some body. And for the sound, we use the default sound. Now, we are playing a sound when the app is in the foreground and the timer is done. And it would be nice if we use the same sound for the notification, and we can do that. So let's do this. We just override the sound value here, and we can provide a UN notification sound. And we want this override, which expects a custom sound file by name, and it wants a UN notification sound name. And in here, we use the raw value override of that constructor for that class. So as the raw value, we can simply provide the name of the resource. And remember, we already have that in our Pomodoro audio sounds enum. So all we need to do here is Pomodoro audio sounds, and we want the done sound, and we use the resource calculator property we created on there. Okay. Next, we have to set up a trigger, and this is what tells the notification center what triggers the notification, and we want one that is triggered a certain amount of seconds from now. So let's create that trigger, and this is a UN, a user notification, time interval, notification trigger. And the time interval is a certain amount of seconds, and we don't want to repeat it. So, and instead of providing a default value here, we of course want that to be a parameter of the method. So we just say seconds, which is a time interval, and replace the value here. Then we have to create the request, and the request is of type user notification request. and we can provide an identifier, the content and the trigger. So for the identifier, we just say my notification. You could put anything in here, and that is only relevant if we have more than one sort of notification we are sending. That way we will be able to, for instance, remove specific notifications. But since we only send one sort of notification, it doesn't really matter to us. The content we already defined, as we have the trigger. So all that's left to do is adding the notification to the center. So notification center, add request. Before we continue to the main business logic, let's just add a small tweak here. Instead of these two default values, let's just add those as attributes for the function as well. So we have a body, type string, and sorry, it's the wrong way around, the title, which is also of type string. I've used these two and here. Let's see if this works. So let's add another new file as with UI view, and we call this notification demo. Create that. So to make sure this is displayed, we open the content view and replace all this in here and replace it with notification demo. So back in notification demo, all we want is a button that says send notification. And as its action, we want Pomodoro notification, send schedule notification in, say, 5 seconds. And if we have to run this in the simulator, and let's do this. Takes a second or two to build. There we go. Now if we click send notification and we leave the application, it should 5 seconds later send us a notification. But it will not, because as we mentioned before, you have to request for permission to do so first. So let's do that. So we have to ask ourselves, when are we going to ask for permission? We might think that it's a good idea to put it in here, for instance, but in reality, with our final application, we won't have a button that is all about sending notifications. The notification is just an additional feature that we have, and the timer still runs, whether or not. So we don't want to interrupt the workflow of the user whenever he clicks it. When we find out we cannot send notification, we don't want to interrupt the user in whatever he's doing. So I'd rather display an alert or a label that tells the user, hey, it's all running fine, but you won't get any notifications. So I would like to have a variable up here, a state variable, that says show warning, and this is false. And if this is true, let me surround this with a VStack. If show warning, then we want to display another VStack that says text notifications are disabled, and it should have a button enable, and as its action it should open the settings so the user can enable notifications. So when should we check for the authorization status? You might think that we could simply add on appear here and do it in here. Use a Pomodoro notification class, check authorization, and we will use a trailing closure here, receiving the authorized Boolean. So, and we set the show warning to not authorized. So we only show the warning if we are not authorized. The problem is, onAppear is only called when the user is built. So if the user leaves the application and comes back in, so if you just send it to the background, we will not have the chance to check authorization again. And the user might have changed the notification status by now, or the notification permission. So what should we use instead? Well, we can have a look at the current scene phase. So there's an environment variable called scene phase that tells us whether a view is active, inactive, or in the background. So let me add that up here. So environment, scene phase. And we add that to let's call it scene phase. And we can then check for that scene phase on the onChange of scene phase. And the scene phase has several status, and the one we're interested in is active. When it's active, or rather when it enters the active mode, then we want to check for authorization. So let's have a look at this in the simulator. And you see, it asks us for permission to send notifications. So let's allow this. Click on send notifications, send the app to the background. There we go. The notification arrives. Clicking on it will open the app again. The user can now go to the settings and the app's settings, notifications, and disable notifications. We now reopen our app. The block is going to be displayed because the authorization settings changed. All that is left to do is to actually add code that lets the user enable notifications again. And let's do that now. So of course we cannot set this directly in our app, but what we can do is we can open the settings page for our app. And I will just write down some code here and you can copy that. Use UI application shared, open, and it requests or requires a URL and the string of the string UI application open settings URL string. So this is getting the settings URL of the application, and we know a value will arrive here. And options, we will simply say them, and for the completion handler, we don't need one. We can set nil. So don't really have to understand what's happening here exactly. All that's left here now, we cannot run that like that. We have to run that in the main thread, and you do that by using the dispatch queue it was. Yeah. And we want it in the main thread, and we want to run it asynchronously. So we put that in here. So let's switch back to the simulator. Oh no, we have to rebuild it. And if we click enable, it opens the settings for our app. We can re-enable it, go back to our app, and the alert disappears, and we can send notifications again. Let's just lock the screen. And here's the notification.